As many as 19 countries want to join the BRICS.
The world's largest oil producer, Saudi Arabia, is reportedly asking to join BRICS.
Egypt has applied to join the BRICS group.
The government of Iran submitted an application for BRICS membership.
Algeria is interested in joining the BRICS, the economic bloc.
The 5 BRICS countries of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa have received dozens of formal and informal applications from other countries around the world to join BRICS. The leaders of BRICS are currently meeting to discuss the possibilities of expansion and the criteria needed to join their exclusive club. In this video, I thought it'd be interesting to dive deeper into who the top candidates are to join BRICS based on that country's relationship with BRICS and if their ideologies are aligned. I'll be narrowing it down to the final 4 countries, discussing their impact on the US dollar if they were to join BRICS, and eventually making my #1 selection of who's gonna actually join BRICS. So make sure to stick around to the end of the video to find out. I had a tough time determining where to draw the line because I can't include all 195 countries around the world or this video would be 5 hours long. So I settled on including the top 50 countries based on the most recent GDP data. The GDP, or gross domestic product, basically measures the size of a country's economy. And it would seem reasonable that the country most likely to join BRICS is going to be on this list. So without further ado, let's start eliminating some of these countries because this graphic is getting crowded. The obvious removal is the 5 BRICS countries because they're not going to be joining a second time. The next group I'm eliminating are the G7 nations of the United States, Japan, Germany, the UK, Italy, and Canada. You'll notice that all these countries are still the highest remaining GDPs left on the board. That's because the G7 is highly regarded as one of the most exclusive alliances in the world. In 1975, the G7 was formed to discuss economic concerns like inflation and recessionary factors, like how the decrease in value of the world reserve currency, the US dollar, was impacting the global economy. They are still meeting to this day to discuss global economic governance, international security, and energy policies. And to be clear, the G7 doesn't pass any laws or policies. It's more to make sure these economic powers are aligned and see the world through the same lens. The G7 countries make up 46% of global GDP and less than 10% of the global population. The ideologies between the G7 countries and the BRICS countries are not aligned at all. So that's why those countries will not be joining BRICS. Okay, let's reset that graphic and move on to the next group of countries that are least likely to join BRICS, which are those of the European Union. I'm not going to list off each of those countries, but you can see here it eliminates 12 countries from this list. What I didn't mention before when talking about the G7 countries is the G7 also includes leaders from the European Union, which is its own entity, has its own leadership, and its own flag. My sense here is that since the European Union is an extension of G7, they will likely have the similar ideology, alignment, and global governance, therefore making it very unlikely that anyone from this group is going to join BRICS. All right, let's reset that graphic again, and boom, we're down to 24 countries. So now, instead of eliminating the bad fits, I'm actually going to focus on the countries with the biggest ties to BRICS. It's been reported that 20 or more countries have officially or unofficially applied to join BRICS. About half those countries didn't make the top 50 GDP list, but for those that did, let's put a check mark next to those countries, and those that didn't, let's put a big fat X next to them. These are the ones that haven't shown any significant interest in BRICS. We're down to 12 now, it's getting a lot tougher. Let's look at it now from a BRICS point of view to see who would benefit them the most. In 2014, the BRICS countries created the New Development Bank. Its goal is to mobilize resources for infrastructure and sustainable development projects in emerging markets and developing countries. And according to their website, Bangladesh, the UAE, and Egypt have joined the bank as official members within the last couple years. So the fit for these countries joining BRICS is already there, but personally, I think the BRICS is going to want to make a bigger splash than those 3 countries, so I'm going to have to eliminate them. And if I'm removing those countries because BRICS doesn't think they're big enough, I also have to get rid of Nigeria, Iran, and Pakistan. Just for transparency, those last 6 countries I do believe will join BRICS at some point in the future. I still have to get rid of 2 more to get to our final 4. This is tough. I'm gonna eliminate Indonesia and Thailand. Not because I don't think they're gonna join BRICS. I do eventually think they're gonna join BRICS. Both sides are very fond of each other. So much so that China invited them to a BRICS Plus virtual meeting back in 2022. But I think the last 4 countries remaining are much better fits for BRICS. Down to the final 4 countries of Mexico, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Argentina. So let's start there with Argentina, who are currently in their their worst economic crisis since their depression in 1998 to 2002, when unemployment climbed to 20% and more than half the population slid below the poverty line, and people in the United States think they have it bad. Currently, the country's inflation rate has risen over 100%. They've had their biggest drought in 60 years, impacting their agricultural exports, and they have no way of paying back a $44 billion loan from the International Monetary Fund. But hey, all is good, they still have this guy. Messi. Argentina's president officially applied to BRICS, but the problem is he's already confirmed that he's not going to be running for a second term. And with elections in October, it's anyone's guess of what actually is going to happen here. As for the US dollar, an Argentina addition to BRICS could speed up the process for a Latin American currency, which the Brazilian president has been very passionate about creating to remove the US dollar as the intermediary currency. So if larger Latin American countries like Argentina latches onto this currency, it could mean less usage of the US dollar slowly over time. What about Turkey? Current President Erdogan couldn't be more obsessed with BRICS, specifically Vladimir Putin, who has called their relationship special. Erdogan has already called his shot and thinks BRICS should add the T already. BRICS. But Turkey has their own economic issues. The Turkish lira has weakened about 20% compared to the US dollar, and inflation was as high as 85% last year. But hey, don't worry about it, because now it's only currently 40%. As far as how a Turkey move to BRICS would impact the US dollar, quite honestly, I don't think it would too much. Even though the overall US and Turkey trade economy jumped from $10.8 billion in 2009 to $21 billion in 2020, I don't see a drastic impact, at least in the near future. Let's talk about Mexico. Now, I can go into a deep dive here on how Mexico joining BRICS impacts the US dollar, or I could just point you to the video that I already made on this topic, which should be popping up on the screen now. So make sure you pause me over here, go over there, and then come back to find out who the winner is and who's joining BRICS. Which brings us to our last country, Saudi Arabia. Being the world's second largest producer of oil and no real ties to any country, they seem like a perfect fit to join. But Saudi Arabia and the United States have had a long-standing relationship that goes back 70 plus years. In 1945, the US made a deal with Saudi Arabia in which the US dollar was the only allowable currency for oil trading. This was the birth of what's known as the petrodollar. So in order for countries to continue powering their country with oil, they needed to hold the US dollar to do so, making the dollar a necessity for countries around the world. But the tide is turning. Saudi Arabia is now open to trading oil and other currencies, including the Chinese yuan. And the name Petro Yuan has started to surface. If Saudi Arabia were to join BRICS, BRICS would have 2 of the 3 top oil-producing countries and a 25% market share around the world. Pretty significant. And for context, US has about a 15% market share. Even with the emergence of renewable energies, countries around the world are still going to need to buy oil to keep their country going. And if Saudi Arabia is looking to use less dollars in these trades, then less countries won't need to hold as much US dollar, meaning they're investing less into US markets, eventually hurting the US economy. And this is why Saudi Arabia is my choice for the first most logical country to join BRICS. Not only that, but how fun is the new BRICS acronym gonna be to say? BRICS. This video tackled some specific countries and their relationship with the US dollar, but what if you wanted a more broad understanding of why the entire world hates the US dollar and is looking to get rid of it? Don't worry, I got you covered in this video here.